Have you ever gone to a tango class and learned something specific and then go to another class and hear a completely opposite instruction? I'm sure you've had that experience because I think everyone struggles that when they first start learning tango. For me, when I first started, it was so confusing to understand who to listen to, which teacher was right, how to parse out the information, and get to the truth of it. Now, this perceived contradiction, this paradox of hearing opposite perspectives from different teachers really stems from the different styles of tango that different people end up practicing as dancers. There's not one unifying tango style anymore. I don't know if there ever was. But today we're going to really talk about the three most common, most broad categories of tango styles that we see on the dance floor, which are Milonguero style, Salon style, and Nuevo. Now, I've talked a lot about dancing to specific styles of music, and I've even used the same words to describe those styles of music like Milonguero and Salon. So there is a bit of a confusion point here because these words that we use for different things in tango end up meaning lots of different things. And it's sometimes a little challenging to figure out what you're talking about. So I'm going to try to be very clear in this episode, but right away, just remember that the words that I'm using might be the same, but in this episode, unlike other episodes, we're really going to talk about the style of movement of the actual dance versus the music. However, of course, in the case of tango specifically, it does not exist separate from music. The music actually informs a lot about which style of tango we end up dancing. So there is a connection there, but in terms of the actual focus of today's topic, it's going to be about the movement. Now, like many dancers, my first experience with tango involved a teacher that I worshiped. I think it's very common when you first start, the very first teacher that you have, you sort of put them up on a pedestal and you believe everything they say. And especially because there's a little bit of competitive nature to tango among teachers as well. Some teachers get very possessive of their students. It's not surprising that some dancers who grow up into their tango maturity believing that what their teachers taught them is the only way, is the right way to dance. So I kind of had the same perspective for a long time. And when I left my original nest where I started my tango journey, which was Dallas, Texas, and I went to Portland and then moved on to Buenos Aires, I was struck by this confusion of deciding who to listen to because I couldn't understand what the value system was. What should I be focusing on? Should I be learning embellishments or should I be focusing on connection? What is dissociation and do I need more of it? And are my pivots all balanced? And should I focus on my pivoting technique? There was so many details that were thrown at me that I couldn't quite figure out how to organize them in my own mind, which caused a lot of frustration. And I just spent a lot of time in class not asking the questions I was having in my head because I couldn't even ask them at the time. So it was really frustrating. And I remember at one point, my teacher in Portland, Oregon, Alex Krebs, many of you know him or know of him. He's kind of legendary. But I remember at one point, he said to me that as a dancer, a social dancer in tango, you pretty much have to choose one of two paths. You either choose to specialize in a particular style, a particular aesthetic, and you become a specialized dancer, which means that you will be really good in a particular style, but you will really only enjoy dancing with dancers of that style. And especially if you rise to a prominent level of technique and virtuosity, then you will become really picky. You will want to dance with dancers who can meet you at that level. So you'll become really specialized. The other path is to become more generalized, become more about adapting to different styles of dance from different people, which means that if you focus on adaptation, you will get to dance with more people, but you won't necessarily have the same stylistic accomplishment, or the aesthetic is not going to be as prominent. So for me, it was a no-brainer at the time. I really wanted to become the generalized dancer. I wanted to be able to dance with as many people as possible. I didn't really care what they looked like or how their style appeared to me. I wanted to experience everything. So I think at the forefront of my mind was this anxiety about sitting and not being asked to dance. So I wanted to minimize that chance. And so I chose the path of being a more generalized dancer. That was the first step in me kind of choosing a certain focus in my dance. It wasn't at that time that I even understood the differences between the Milonguero, Salon, and Nuevo. But I thought, looking back, it was a key moment that I would encourage all dancers to address for themselves, because even deciding at that point what your focus is can inform you both what to study, what to focus on, which teachers to study with, who to listen to, but it also informs you of who you want to dance with and who would want to dance with you, because I am not a very specialized dancer. And I know for a fact that there are dancers out there who don't really want to dance with me because I don't have those qualities. And before I understood this kind of focus, this split, I would have taken that personally. I would have said, oh, I don't measure up in some way. This person doesn't like how I dance. They don't like my technique. I somehow am lacking. But just understanding that some people are going to be more specialized and they're going to want to dance with dancers of that specific level and with that specific technique, then frees me up to say, you know what, actually, I'm just fine. I understand that that's just not their cup of tea. Now, in terms of me actually understanding the differences between these three core styles, I have to say I spent years in confusion because these words were thrown around in different contexts, and I didn't really know how to attach them to any sort of definition. So a lot of my definitions of what I'm going to present to you right now is really something I cobbled together over time. One of my goals with this episode is really to open it up as a broader question for us in general as social dancers, because I think these definitions keep evolving, and it's not like there is a standardized Tango appreciation book that's going to define these terms for us that we can build upon. I think these terms are being defined as we're discussing them right now. So I would love to hear your perspective on what I'm talking about in this episode. If you want to pop in the comments after the episode, what you think, how you define these styles, which style you prefer. And if you prefer sending me a message on social media, you can reach me on social at I'm So Tango, IMSO Tango. Instagram is my preferred method of communication these days. That's where you'll get to me the fastest. So let's dive into the actual styles. I'm going to start with Milonguero style, which in my mind is sort of the foundational style of tango. Milonguero style is the earliest, I think, codified style that we can say, okay, this is what it looks like. And it's basically close embrace. The word milonguero really stands for someone who goes to the milonga a lot, someone who dances at the milonga. That's kind of the original meaning of the word. So if we're thinking about early styles of tango, how early milongueros danced, it's a lot of close embrace, small movements, focusing on the line of dance. It's not very ornate. There's not a lot of embellishments. It's very much tied to the music. It's not very performative. It's not very loud. In some ways, it's the most boring style. It's the style that's going to appeal the least to someone who's walking off the street and looking at tango. The first time I witnessed people dancing milonguero style, the thought in my mind was, that just looks like shuffling of feet. They're just shuffling feet around each other. That's all that's happening. I did not understand the beauty of it, and it took me years to appreciate the skill set involved in dancing Milonguero style. But that's just to show tango is just has this kind of complexity to it that's really interesting, that the things that seem really flashy and exciting at first are not actually the things that end up being the most profound. I even recently saw a urban kizomba dancer on social media post a reel where he decided to take a tango move, random tango move that he wanted to incorporate into urban kiz, as it is called. And urban kiz actually is an interesting dance form. It has a lot of similarity to tango. There's a lot of overlap. They have a cross system, which is really interesting, but they don't dance it in a line of dance, so it actually looks different. So he took an element from someone's performance and tried to make it happen. And it was the most esoteric, unusual boleo type of move that is so nuevo, is so out there. I don't even think I've ever seen it, and I've been dancing for a really long time. So it's a very innovative move, and that's the thing that's going to catch people's eyes, really, when we first are introduced to tango. But that's not really the thing that we end up sticking with as we continue. So Milonguero style is the opposite of the flash. In technical terms, it's this very close embrace. It's very intimate. It's very small. And it's just about walking and doing simple figures like crosses, simple turns, ocho cortado, those kinds of movements. There's actually many subcategories of styles within tango that have not really made it into our understanding or our knowledge as social dancers because it didn't really last. It's more of a historical artifact. But the Milonguero style, I would say, as a social dancer, is the first one that we can say, okay, this is the foundation. This is where it all started. It starts from close embrace. It starts from this very small kind of dance that moves on a line, moves in a circle. Now, when tango first started, remember in the 20s and 30s, it was not fashionable among the elite and the upper class to dance tango. It was not a dance that was accepted in the upper echelons of society. It was a dance of the lower class of people, the poor class of people. So if you can imagine the early days of tango where you have tango being danced in the streets, and it's a lot of like strangers meeting and dancing, it sort of has a particular look that develops from that. But then when we get into the 30s and 40s, when tango became more fashionable and accepted in the upper echelons of society because of its prominence in Europe, right? Tango actually took off in Europe, and that's when Argentina was like, oh, I guess the French are doing it, so we're going to embrace it too. And because of that shift in the standing of tango in society, it changed. The way it looked changed. So we went from having this really kind of primitive form where it's very close, it's very small, to now tango is being danced in these big venues that are very opulent, and a lot of rich people are going there and everybody's dressed up. And the thing that really makes a difference is that when you move into the Salon period of the music, the Salon style developed partially because now you didn't have strangers who are just meeting up and dancing once in a while. You had married couples who became dancers, and they continuously danced for years. So when you have that stability for an art form, and you have the venues and you have the financial support, of course the art form is going to develop. So the dance changed, the way it looked changed. It became more proper, it became more elegant. The Salon style, to me, the way I see it and the way I categorize it in my mind now, is the sense that the body is more elongated and erect, and that the two people are moving more independently. You'll notice in a lot of Salon style performances, usually the couple starts together in close embrace. They walk a little bit together, and then at some point they will separate, and they will start moving more centrifugally and create a lot of rotation and spin, which to me, visually, that's what salon style is really good at. You can really see a lot of the flow and the circularity and the spiralic action of tango in salon style. Because the embrace slightly separates, you have a little bit more room. And because both dancers are more on their own axis, you can actually do a lot more. In Milonguero style, you might have heard the term apelado, which is something that is part of Milonguero style. It's only possible in Milonguero style because it is a term that signifies the two people are leaning towards each other and there's a little bit of a sharing of weight. Not enough to be off axis, but enough to lean so that there's this kind of a leaning sensation between two people that you carry with you as you walk. When you're dancing salon, it's a little bit more separated. There's a little bit more space. And because of that, the vocabulary that you're going to be dancing is different. It's not anymore just a little turning and a little bit of ocho cortado here and there. Now you have big movements and saccatas and boleos and lapis and enrosque. And there's all these embellishments that come in the form because of the salon style music and this evolution in the social standing of tango. So chronologically, we can see that Milonguero style fits very well with Milonguero style music or even Guardia Vieja music, right? Remember, we have the other terms to assign to the music of that time. So I would say Milonguero style dancing is very much fitting with the Guardia Vieja or Milonguero style music. Close embrace, smaller movements, more truncated vocabulary, not so ornamental, not a lot of embellishments. And then when the music becomes more ornamental and the music becomes more opulent, that's why salon style developed. And so when you dance to salon style music, a lot of times taking on the quality of salon style dancing fits really well. So to me, if I'm dancing to something like Late Di Sarli, Calo, De Mare, a lot of times the way I dance it will be slightly different because the music itself has a bit of a different quality. So we can line these up pretty well with the styles up to this point. Milonguero and Salon can go with the Milonguero and Guardia Vieja style of music and Salon music. Now, when we get to Nuevo, things break apart a little bit in our alignment because we don't have Nuevo style music that we dance to regularly. There is a Nuevo style genre of tango music that did start in the 90s at about the same time that Nuevo style dancing started. But it really didn't take off. There's still some artists who are making music in the electro tango genre of music, but it doesn't really measure up to the richness of traditional tango music that we all love. However, Nuevo style tango is the latest form, the latest major formal evolution of tango, and it's happened in the 90s. And it's funny that the term Nuevo that began to be applied to this particular style is not even the term that the originators of this style would assign to it. They didn't really call it Nuevo. This is something that everybody else started calling. But the Nuevo style that we know, what we understand as Nuevo style dancing, is actually attributed to three dancers in the 90s, and that is Chicho Frumboli, Fabian Salas, and Gustavo Naveira. What happened technically is that Nuevo style actually opens up the embrace a lot more, and sometimes the embrace even breaks. You have influences coming in from other dance forms like modern or other social dances. And so the Nuevo style becomes even more experimental than Salon. You have very esoteric sequences and very strange combinations that are very exciting. And when I started tango, Nuevo style was sort of on its way out, but it was still kind of the area where a lot of dancers were focusing. So I first developed more as a Nuevo style dancer, as a follower. I really liked that style. It's a really fun style to dance in. It's also easier in some ways than Milonguero style or even Salon because it's kind of free form. It's a little bit more independent, even more independent than Salon, because sometimes there's this breaking of the embrace. In some ways, it looks like a completely different dance to some people, but it's very flashy. It's really fun. It's really exciting. And it also takes up a lot of room, which is why Nuevo style does not work well sometimes in a line of dance kind of context. So, on a trajectory in terms of the mechanics, we go from something that's very, very intimate and small and takes up very little space to something that's very, very big and flamboyant. And Nuevo style works really well with music that is more experimental and abstract. So you could apply it to later puglieses and troilos. But where Nuevo style dancing really excels is when you dance it to other styles of music. So alt music, as it is called, which is anything other than tango. A lot of the more contemporary music that has different instrumentation and different textures, different rhythms, you can actually play with the Nuevo style really well with that music. Now, the funny story with these three guys who started the tango's Nuevo style is that when they were developing this, they weren't really out to create anything special. They were just dancing. They were just pushing their own limits. And there's a very nice interview with the two of the dancers that I will link in the show notes that you can check out, where they talk about that time. And they describe this process where it's a constant process of exploration and questioning and prodding into their own dance, not settling for what they know, but looking for different answers. And the thing about Nuevo that I actually recently just learned, which is kind of amazing that I've been dancing this long and only now I've been sort of exposed to this aspect of it, is that Nuevo is not just a style, it's also a way of thinking. When we compare early tango and the way we dance now, one of the big contrasts is that there's a way of thinking about tango that's about the figures. You learn specific figures and sequences of steps, and you execute them almost like a cookie cutter pattern. And your virtuosity as a dancer is to memorize different sequences and then combine them in different ways. And early on, one of the key features of the different milongueros who were dancing back in the day was that they would create their own signature figures or their own signature combinations that then other people would learn. And so you would possibly go study with someone and then you would study their movement, you would do their figures. And if you dance those figures, other people would say, oh, you're dancing in the style of so-and-so. It could be recognized that these are the figures that somebody else originated. Nuevo style thinking and Nuevo style technique is what I would call more dancing one step at a time. It's a way of more intuitively creating your own patterns by applying different principles. So instead of learning sequences and then practicing putting those sequences in your dance, which is one way, you learn principles and then apply those principles in a more open-ended way where your dance kind of becomes your own. And those two methodologies actually exist side by side. And to this day, there are teachers who are very much focused on the figures. They teach the figures, they teach the series of steps for you to execute and learn as sort of a package. And so you learn these little packages and then you have them ready. And that's kind of how your understanding of the vocabulary progresses. But there's other ways, other methods of learning tango now that are more prominent, where teachers have come up with ways of systematizing the movements and categorizing them in such a way that you don't have to learn the sequences. You can learn principles, and then you can construct your own sequences from that. This is the way I've been dancing for a long time. I have a really hard time with sequences. I'm terrible at remembering figures or choreographies. And so because I am lacking in that department, I basically naturally went into this other direction where I just focus on the principles and then put my own spin on it. The categories that we name, Salon, Milonguero style, and Nuevo, they're not necessarily just about the physical component of how you move, an aesthetic, how aesthetically how it appears. It's also a mindset. It's also a way of thinking that's different. And that can clarify for you, what kind of dancer are you? Are you the kind of dancer who really likes patterns? You like to learn sequences. It's really easy for you to remember. And so that's kind of what your enjoyment is learning that. Or are you more of a dancer like myself who has a really hard time with patterns? And the good news is that neither one is right or wrong. It's just, again, along the way, this is how tango has been evolving. And we have these different methodologies that have been around for us to use as tools for our own dance. Now, at the risk of overwhelming you a little too much with the complex layers of this topic, I'm going to also introduce this idea. Just because Milonguero style developed at the same time that Milonguero style music or Guardia Vieja music was developing alongside of it, it doesn't mean that you must dance Milonguero style to that music, or you must dance Salon style to Salon style music. You might be able to say that if there was some sort of codified program that was at a university where we delineated these things very clearly and we put rules to it, but there is no such rule. So even though I've established this connection between the music and kind of how the styles align between the music and the actual movement, ultimately it's going to be up to you, because I could technically and theoretically dance Nuevo style to any style of music, right? I could hit the beat and do things in the proper timing and use the Nuevo style to dance to Guardia Vieja. But is it going to look good? That's the question. And it takes a long time to answer that question, because you have to see it for yourself. For a long time, I only danced one way, and it was not clear to me that I could dance differently. Nowadays, I have a very specific preference when I dance to pugliese or something that's more abstract. My embrace typically opens. I do more experimental movements. I go into some Nuevo style. Sometimes I'll start in Salon style and I move into Nuevo style and return to Salon style. Ultimately, there's a continuum there that you can explore for yourself. Now, an interesting challenge can be when you're dancing in a really crowded space and it's pugliese, and you really want to dance Nuevo style, but you only have space to dance Milonguero style in close embrace. There's something that you can do in your own movement. And what I usually think about is, even in my own Milonguero style embrace, as I'm dancing pugliese, can I infuse my movement with more Salon style qualities? Which in this case, instead of just being cozy and small, I'm going to be in close embrace, but I will elevate my posture. I will be a little bit taller, a little bit longer, and I will smooth out my movements a little bit more. So within the style itself, in any of these styles, you can infuse other styles based on what you need. So it's much more flexible. These definitions are much more flexible, but what's important to understand is when you're listening to other people talk about different techniques, like when you're taking a class or when you're talking to someone about tango, keep track of what style they dominate in and how they're talking about it. Because someone who is a salon style dancer, the way they describe posture and alignment of your head and what they're going to emphasize in terms of what's most important is going to be different than the teacher who teaches mostly close embrace Milonguero style. And of course, if you decide to study with someone who's extremely esoteric and teaches a lot of Nuevo style, they're going to tell you things that nobody else might say, and they might sound really strange. But if you just know what place they're coming from, it'll be easier for you to understand which part is applicable for you, for your dance, what is useful, and what you can set aside. For me, because I focus so much on the social dancing, I really look for movements that I can fit on the social dance floor. So a lot of times when I am around teachers who teach a lot of salon technique that has a lot of spinning and the movement is really dynamic, to me, it's just not my cup of tea. And so I decide, I choose to go to someone else. The same way that I do it with teachers, the way I choose my partners a lot of times will be informed by my preference for that as well. If I'm dancing a song that's Guardia Vieja, it's very sweet and quiet, I wouldn't want to dance it with someone who has a lot of salon technique, someone who is like very dynamic and takes very big steps and wants to move a lot. If I dance with someone like that on a Guardia Vieja, it will feel to me that it doesn't work. I don't like that feeling. I want to dance with someone who will readily give me that Milonguero style embrace. So I would love even for you to consider whenever you have a bad tanda, like that tanda where it feels like you never connect, where things are just sort of bumping around, like you're not able to sync up with the partner. Ask yourself whether there is a stylistic aspect to this that's not matching, that maybe you are the kind of person who really likes dancing close Milonguero style, and you end up dancing with somebody who is very much into Nuevo, and they open up the embrace and they have you do all these things that you're not familiar with. And so that feels to you like fish out of water and it's not comfortable. So those situations happen quite a bit. Now, these three styles are kind of these three modes of exploration. I would say they're all valuable. They all have something to contribute to your evolution as a dancer. So if you haven't decided for yourself what sort of dancer you are, what style of dance you really like, I suggest that you open yourself up and experiment with everything. And when you hear in class contradicting instructions or something that doesn't make sense because someone else told you the opposite, then just remember that these might be stylistic things happening that just kind of have a different language around them, that ultimately it's possible that the two teachers are saying the same thing, but it sounds different based on where they're coming from. So I would say let yourself experiment with all of the styles as much as you can. And if possible, experiment with them as a follower and as a leader, because I definitely notice there's a difference for me whether I follow or lead which style I prefer. There will be these different qualities for yourself that you'll discover when you just kind of try on these different styles for size and see which parts appeal to you and which parts you really don't like. Most of the time these days, I don't know if anybody has to choose just one style across the board. I think especially if you're a social dancer and you travel for dancing and you're meeting a lot of people, ultimately your dance is going to be informed by lots of different information and dancing with lots of different people. So it's going to be a fusion of things. So you can pick up different things from different teachers and see how you want to incorporate them. But let's say that you do decide that you want to be a particular style. And when we're thinking about these days, what that would be, I can see a lot of dancers choosing salon style, especially if you want to perform or compete. When we're thinking about competitions these days, the championships that we see, the style that we see being danced is salon style. When we're thinking about category Tango de Pista, which is one of the major categories in a championship or a tango competition, Tango de Pista is typically salon style. And if you have dancers who do not dance that kind of specific aesthetic of the salon, they typically don't make it to the final rounds. So there's a preference for salon aesthetic when it comes to competing. And if you are a dancer who decides to do that, then it is worthwhile to really pursue specific teachers for a long period of time. In order to do that, you just need to find the dancers who really inspire you, whose dance reflects the kind of quality you want to have, and try to emulate those dancers and seek out their teaching as much as possible. So for those dancers who really want to focus on crafting a particular style and technique, it is worthwhile to zero in and really focus on that. But again, just remember that comes sometimes at a cost, because the more specialized you become in one technique, the less adaptable you become with other techniques and other types of dancing. Ultimately, whatever style you choose to dance will be dictated by your environment. So if you are a social dancer dancing at a crowded milonga, the navigation and the floor craft will take precedence. This is where a lot of your stylistic choices will be dictated more by what's available rather than even the music or what you want to do in the moment. It's okay, and it's even, I would say, admirable when you can, in the moment, adapt your mechanics to fit the space. Sometimes if I dance with someone and I get really excited and then I realize that I'm dancing too big, it might be appropriate for the music and it might be appropriate for the energy between me and my partner. But if I realize that I'm kind of pushing on the space around me, then I will make it a little bit smaller. Now, there are limitations to that, of course. There's certain movements you can't make small, like back saccatas, over-rotated ochos, and some of the more complex enrosque sequences. You really can't make them happen in a tight, close embrace. You have to open up the space. So this is the name of the game. You know, you have these possibilities, these stylistic elements that you can take on, you can put on, like putting on an outfit, but ultimately you're going to be adjusting it to your partner, the navigation, and the music. And that's what kind of keeps tango in this realm of where it constantly has to keep adapting, right? We can't settle on a particular form because it's not very one-sided. It's very multifaceted. Ultimately, what I want to convey through this somewhat winding discussion is there's not one right style for you to dance. There's not one style that if you dance that, you're guaranteed that you're going to get more dances or you're going to have perfect technique. You as a dancer can choose which to focus on, whether you want to specialize or whether you want to stay versatile. I think a blend of the two ultimately is a good strategy. I notice even dancers who are very prominent in their stylistic choice of salon, let's say, that they will adapt their style when they dance socially. So even as you specialize, realize the other dance styles are there for you to inform your dance. You have a choice to choose different elements and you can fuse them together. You know, you could take an element from Nuevo style and some quality from a Salon style and put that into your Milonguero style embrace and create something new, which in my mind, that's actually how tango evolves. If we go back to that idea of those three guys inventing Nuevo style, how did they do that? It's because they were just dancing and they were experimenting and they were kind of opening up the box on their own thinking. So when you do that over and over again and give yourself permission to bring in different elements and try them out, you will discover new things. And to me, there's nothing more rewarding than dancing with someone that I can tell has cultivated their own understanding of their body, the music, how to move with the partner. That uniqueness that we have as individuals is highlighted when we open up and allow multiple sources of influences to come into the dance rather than just sticking with one particular set of rules. I noticed this one kind of sad thing is that a lot of dancers who started tango many, many years ago, maybe 20 to 30 years ago, and they started with one teacher, they'll say like, my teacher 30 years ago said this, and this is how you do it. And that's how I've been dancing. And then they'll complain that they're not getting enough dances or they're having some physical issues. I even talked to a woman who had to give up tango because she developed a foot injury because of her technique. And simply because this is what she was told, and that's how she did it for 20 years. So we naturally can fall into that trap because we want a guarantee that someone knows the way, and the way they say it, if we follow it, we're going to get what we need. But with tango in particular, I think it works against you to become so narrow-minded because the form is changing. It's evolving through the process of us dancing it. And the way it evolves is by us sort of incorporating these different elements, understanding the music, learning what's possible, and then playing with those elements and seeing what comes up. So next time that you encounter this uncomfortable experience of going to a class and the teacher tells you something that goes completely against what you thought to be true, just remember, take it with a grain of salt. Realize that ultimately all that the teachers can teach you is themselves, whatever they have in themselves. So the style of their dance, how they move their body, that's what they can teach you. And that's why it's so important to expose yourself to lots of different perspectives. And don't worry about finding that reconciliation between the opposing points of view. I think the more you let them sit and percolate and keep taking classes with different teachers, the more things will start making sense and it won't be as confusing. So I'm curious where you land on this. Do you have a preferred style that you like to dance? Do you have a preferred style that you like to watch? Now, to help you with this, I realize listening to me talk about these styles might not bring up concrete images for you of what it actually looks like. So in the show notes, I've actually attached some examples of the different styles that I've been talking about for Salon, Milonguero, and Nuevo. And I'd love for you to check them out and give me some feedback. Let me know what kind of style you like. What do you prefer? Do you agree with my description of the different styles? Do you have any other ways that you describe or understand these stylistic differences? I would love to hear from you. Now, before I leave you, I know it might be a little early to be planning your 2025 itinerary, but I just wanted to pop in that I will be teaching and DJing at the Viva Mexico Tango Festival, and it's going to be at a hotel in Jalisco, Mexico. So I will include the information in the show notes if you are interested. I would love to see you there. It's going to be January 29th through February 3rd. I'm DJing Thursday night, and then I'll be teaching a class for women leaders on Sunday evening. So that's going to be really special. I hope to see you there, and we will continue this banter next week. Until then, ciao.